Who are the greatest members of the Seattle Kraken of all time?
You are Locked On Kraken, your daily podcast on the Seattle Kraken, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what do you say, Seattle hockey fans? Welcome to another episode of Locked On Kraken, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you your favorite team every single day. I do want to mention, though, that the NHL channel, we are in our off season, so we won't be as frequent just for a little while here. But if you have been to the show before, then you know me. For those I'm meeting or you're hearing me and seeing me for the first time, Ayala here, fresh from Paris, France, where I was covering the 2024 Summer Olympics. It was a long haul, a great time, and I'm already thinking, turning the gears about what are some of the storylines going to be out of Milano Cortina, which is, of course, the next Winter Games 2026. We have things to talk about regarding the Seattle Kraken, and hey, maybe some of our players past or present, maybe even future by 2026 will be represented in the Olympics one way or another. But I want to let you know today's episode of Locked On Kraken brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. We want you to make sure you are making the most of the summer deal over at FanDuel. So I'll tell you all about that a little bit later on the show. But I teased this earlier. Who are the top 10? I saw a list floating around. Who are the top 10 Seattle Kraken of all time? And of course, with any of all time, any kind of list, quite honestly, you can go any kind of direction. I think that the names overall on this list were solid. Definitely a name or two that I thought was missing. As far as the ranking, though, I think that might be the biggest issue for me, but we're going to talk about that in just a wee bit. First, I want to get into a little bit of Seattle Kraken news that happened since I personally was away at the Olympics. The first one is just, you always want to celebrate the good times. 20,000 people showed up for a Stanley Cup Day parade honoring Brandon Montour. He, of course, won the Stanley Cup this past season with the Florida Panthers, and says he's, quote, amped up for training camp to start. Brandon Montour is a part of one of the largest First Nation reserves in Canada, and he took the cup there to the Six Nations of the Grand River in Ontario. And, he says that overall things have been crazy regarding the celebration, especially a public celebration, but that also he was excited to have a little bit more of a private party as well. Also says, and we've heard him say this quite honestly since the announcement of his signing, that, he finds the Seattle Kraken extremely gritty, I think is the word I would use. He also says he knows how loud it can get in Climate Pledge Arena. And I think it's interesting that those are some of his talking points. Not saying that it doesn't get loud at CPA, but I think there's also just like a few things that athletes can kind of say to answer a question without having to get into too much detail. So I'm super amped to get to know Brandon Montour just a little bit better. Another piece of news that I wanted to go over is something that is near and dear to me. Hockey is for everyone is kind of the blanket marketing campaign. And I do want to say marketing campaign because I do think it's that first and foremost, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. But it's, hockey is for everyone, promoting diversity in the sport. And I certainly, as many other people have been critical of the rollouts, of the pushbacks, of the recalls of some of the things that we see, including the warm-up jerseys. But what I have always appreciated is that the Seattle Kraken Kraken have always found a way, even though I've been even critical of them in specific areas, one which I think they addressed. But so they have a bunch of their hockey is for everyone nights, except they're no longer considering them hockey is for everyone. They kind of rebranded. I feel like it's like a soft rebrand as the Common Thread Initiative. So this year it will include Hispanic Heritage Month. Talked about that a little bit last year. Didn't feel there was great overlap at the Kraken organization last year. The Firebirds did a little bit of a better job. So that's going to be 10/19. October 19th against Calgary. Military Appreciation Night will be November 12th against the Columbus Blue Jackets. Hockey Fights Cancer against the Nashville Predators on November 20th. Indigenous Peoples Night, we just talked about Brandon Montour, on December 10th versus Montour's former team, the Florida Panthers. Pride Night will be on January 6th against the New Jersey Devils. The Lunar New Year will be celebrated as the Seattle Kraken take on Anaheim on the 28th. Black Hockey History Night is going to be on February 4th versus Detroit. Women in Hockey Night is going to be on March 14th as the Kraken host Utah. We talked about that as I broke down our schedule month by month. Very curious to see how we play against Utah. And we're kind of being lumped in as contemporaries on a few different lists. Some we've already talked about, and of course the one I'm about to talk about. Something I'm about to talk about. And so then we also have Green Night, kind of celebrating Mother Earth on April 12th versus St. Louis. But I want to get into one of those aforementioned lists. It's list season. So who are the top 10 Kraken players of all time? You're probably not surprised to see names like Matty Beniers, Vince Dunn, Jared McCann, and maybe for some of you, Philip Grubauer on that list. And again, I'm going to break the list down, give you what this list from Clutch Points is saying, make some critiques about the names on the list, but particularly the ranking of the list. That's coming up. But first, by way of one of our sponsors, I want to get into some Stanley Cup odds. I mentioned this at the top of the show, but today's episode of Locked On Kraken brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Now, just because the NHL season or any of the other seasons that you're used to watching in the fall and winter are not in season doesn't mean that you can't still find something for you at FanDuel. To begin, the WNBA will start back up soon. You've got Major League Baseball, but also you can take a look at the future odds. We looked at the future odds a lot when Matty Beniers was in the running for Rookie of the Year. And so this summer, FanDuel is going to be hooking up all customers with a boost or bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day all summer long. And so if you head over to FanDuel.com or you just type in FanDuel NHL, which is what I do a lot, then before you sign up, create an account, you can look at some of the odds. For example, right now, FanDuel has the Seattle Kraken at a plus 7,000 right between Washington and Utah. Actually, I think we're tied technically with Washington and Utah in the lower half of the standings to win the Stanley Cup. I mean, it's definitely a choice to pick the Kraken to win the Stanley Cup. I think I need to see a little bit more. But we have the fifth best odds, according to FanDuel, to win the Pacific Division. And I think that's really interesting. So if we take a look right now, we are at plus 1,700, Edmonton at the top at plus 145, Vegas coming in at second at plus 300, and plus 450, the LA Kings. So that's just some of the things that you can do over at FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball, but also us right here on Locked On Kraken. Thanks as always for making Locked On Kraken a part of your daily destination. I want to make sure you also know about the Locked On NHL show. I've talked to you before about Locked On NHL. We do have a women's hockey spotlight that you can check out every other Friday. I host that segment, but you can also find updates on the Pacific Division. And where do we think, again, the Kraken are going to fall, but not what Locked On Kraken thinks. You get a little bit more of an analysis about the division, not just from a Kraken host, someone who follows the Seattle Kraken, but of some of our other hosts. And I think that's always pretty fun. So check out Locked On NHL and make it your second listen of the day, because we know you always make Locked On Kraken a part of your daily destination. Now it's time to head over to this clutch points ranking. 10 greatest Seattle Kraken of all time. Now, we have to just get, the elephant in the room out of the way, right? We don't really have a long history. I mean, we don't. We're going into what, season 4? And so this list will absolutely change. I also think it's interesting if you take a look and check the show notes, either if you're watching on YouTube or if you're listening on audio. But so they have 2 players on the graphic. One is Jared McCann, one is Jordan Eberle, and then they have a player like the face is blacked out, or removed, right? Digitally removed. I mean, if you tell the truth, because I'm then going to go through the list and you'll know who it is, but I'm going to go through here and you just let me know. Who do you think that is? I mean, to me, it was blatantly obvious immediately once I saw the graphics. So go check that out. Again, check the show notes. That's where you can find the link. So Colin Gallant for clutch points, top 10 Seattle Kraken of all time. I'm going to go from 10 to 1 on this list. And I'm going to give you the first 5 names, and then we'll talk about the next 5 in the next segment. So we'll talk about the first 5, 10 through 6, and what I think about the rankings overall. Alexander Wenberg, Andre Burakovsky. So this is going from 10 to 6. At 10 is Alexander Wenberg. At number 9, Andre Burakovsky. At number 8, Philip Grubauer. At number 7, Matty Beniers. And at number 6 is Jaden Schwartz. We'll talk first about Alex Wenberg, who we talked about we'll be seeing in the division. Only player on this list to still not be playing for the Kraken, so there's another hint for you. Now, this list says he still deserves the spot, talks a little bit about his career. He amassed 107 points in 236 career games with the Kraken. That's good for 7th all time. He was also an important part of the playoff heroics, chipping in 7 points in 2023. He won't long be remembered in Seattle, but he was a complimentary piece of this roster for almost 3 years, and that's enough to earn him the number 10 slot. Now, I know I was a little hot and cold about Alexander Wenberg, especially leading up to the trade deadline. What I can say, being on the other side of the trade deadline, that I absolutely agree with is that Alexander Wenberg played a critical role for the Seattle Kraken, especially in the net front. And not because he was kind of physical and necessarily taking direct hits. That's not really his game. There's someone else on this list who I think is a little more gritty, a little more grindy, has a little more of that sandpaper game, and we'll talk about. But, the ability for him and his hand-eye coordination. I am still adjusting to time in the US. Anyway, his hand-eye coordination was definitely something that impressed. I still do think the Seattle Kraken need a better net front presence, but in seeing what we had, and there's another player in this group of 5 that I think also doesn't get as much credit as he should for the net front presence. I respect and appreciate Alex Wenberg being on this list. Andre Burakovsky. Now, if you listen to the show, I have pretty strong opinions on how Andre Burakovsky is, not as a player. I want to make that clear. I have strong opinions on how much faith the Kraken organization, whether it's literally the front office, but certainly the fan base, putting and saying that he's one of the greatest, has the potential to be our superstar. The word there that's doing a lot of work for Burakovsky is potential. And that's effectively what we see in this article right here. Despite playing just 98 games for the Kraken, Burakovsky broke into the scene 39 points in 49 games in 22-23. So he wasn't a part of that round 1 win against the Avalanche. Of course, he had just won the cup with them, but he is, quote, remains a key piece of this franchise. Again, if he can stay healthy. I'm not mad at Burakovsky being on this list. Do I think he'll stay at number 9 if he stays healthy? Likely not. But for right now, I'm okay with Berkey at 9. 8, Philip Grubauer. I will say this. I do think Philip Grubauer should be on the list. I'm not sure that Philip Grubauer should be top 5, but I also don't know if 8 is quite the right place. 5, 6 is kind of what I'm leaning towards, maybe 7. But here's the matter of fact. Philip Grubauer was an integral piece of making that playoff run, specifically the run in the playoffs, getting to 2 Game 7s, because there were other elements where the Seattle Kraken, quite frankly, looked really fatigued, really tired, and Philip Grubauer felt like he was aging like fine wine to me. So on that alone, I want to have him higher up on this list. That being said, we've talked about this a lot on the show. Philip Grubauer, inconsistent. He has trouble staying healthy. I'm a little bit less, goalies put in a lot of work, which is another point that I want to make. So anyway, on the injury front, goalies are going to get hurt. I think, though, we're going to have to keep eyes on that, and more on that with respect to Philip Grubauer in a minute. I still don't think we have a great defense. I know everyone's talk about the advanced analytics. This is when I get a little bullish about the eye test, because there's no way you can tell me that this team is playing good defense. What I see is a team that overworks their goaltenders. Now, if they happen to survive the rush from the other team, that to me is not the same as being good, sound, a top 10 defensive team. I mean, I don't know. So that overworks Grubauer. It overworked Martin Jones. It overworked Joey Daccord. Now, do I think either one of them should be on this list? Now, if you know me, I like to be a little controversial. I have my favorite Kraken members, and I will say this till, might be the hill I die on. Martin Jones in season 2, one of the most clutch, like, overtime performances, given all of the situation and the scenarios. Like, to me, that we don't talk about that enough. Do I think he makes a top 10 list? Probably not. But I think maybe it's more moment, like best moment. It wasn't just the one moment. It was like, but I don't know. But we need to put some respect on Martin Jones. I'm not putting him on the top 10 list, though. And Beniers and Schwartz, I think Beniers, it might be about right at the moment. I don't think he'll stay there, but just the night and day of his first 2 full seasons, it's kind of hard to not disagree there. So again, going from 10 through 6, and we'll go 1 through, or the 5 through 1 in the next segment. Wenberg at number 10. Andre Burakovsky at number 9, Philip Grubauer at number 8, Matt Beniers at number 7, and Jaden Schwartz at number 6 of the top all-time greatest Seattle Kraken members per Colin. I believe it was right. Colin who wrote this? Yes, per Colin over at Clutch Points. Coming up next, I'll go through the top 5 and give you my opinion on that, and my analysis and my opinion on that, including who do I think was omitted and snubbed from this list. We'll get into that on Locked On Kraken. I appreciate you making Locked On Kraken a part of your daily destination and your first listen of the day. Mentioned it earlier, but make sure you go head over to Locked On NHL as your second listen of the day. So many storylines, rumors about who's going to be the captain in Toronto. We've talked about trade rumors, and that's only coming from the Kraken perspective. So if you want more on the National Hockey League and women's hockey every other Friday, then you need to listen to Locked On NHL. Make it your second listen of the day and a part of your daily destination for sports. All right. 5 through 1. Who are the top 5 Kraken of all time? based on Colin's article for Clutch Points. At number 5, Oliver Bjorkstrand. At number 4, Vince Dunn. At number 3, Yanni Gourde. At number 2, Jordan Eberle. And at number 1, Jared McCann. Let's just start with McCann. I don't know that you're going to meet anyone who's, whether they're a Kraken fan or not, that's probably not putting McCann at the top of the list. Now, I'm not talking about who your favorite Seattle Kraken player is, because with all due respect to Jared McCann, nothing against the guy. Would I say that he's probably my personal favorite member of the Kraken all time? No, but that's because of a lot of different reasons. I bet top 3 for me. Absolutely not going to rank it right now off the top of my head, but I'm putting Ryan Donato in my top 3, in my personal top 3. Does that mean that he's one of the top 3 Kraken of all time? No, I get that. So Jared McCann, having him there, I think makes a lot of sense. Here's what Colin had to say about it. Starts off with Jared McCann. Says, although he wasn't great for the Kraken in their 2023 Stanley Cup playoff run, yeah, because he got knocked out. Freaking hey. Anyway, that's obviously not in the article, but I'm offering additional context. He's still undoubtedly the best player in franchise history. 28 years old, leads the team in goals, 97, and points, 185, in 241 games, has the highest points per game clip at 0.77. Yeah, we're going to talk about points per game in a little bit when it comes to the rest of this list. The NHL All-Star is beginning to separate himself from an organization that doesn't really have any star players, both past or present, and he should be a key piece of the equation for the next few seasons at least. I kind of like that because, again, I feel like a lot of people are pushing Burakovsky on us, but there are some players. One of them who is on the list, one that is not on the list that I think at most should, or at the least, should be an honorable mention. We'll talk about that. But I think we can all agree here with Jared McCann. I'm just going to go 1, 2, 3 because that's how they're listed in Colin's article now. Jordan Eberle. If you listen to the show, you know how I feel about Jordan Eberle. I think he's captain material. I would love to see him as the next captain of the Seattle Kraken. I know we extended him, not a super long contract, maybe not enough to warrant him being a captain. I think he is absolutely captain material. Would love to see him be the captain. Oh, people talking about his age. You need a young guy. You need, Matty Beniers to take that over. Well, here's the thing. And I'm not saying Matty B can't be captain material, but you need a captain, period, whether they have a C or not. And for my money, Jordan Eberle does all of the things to be, whether he has the C or not, the captain. He's the captain. He's the freaking captain. Him and maybe Jaden Schwartz. And captains do things when they're hard, when they're difficult. They take the team on their shoulder. And Eberle and Jaden Schwartz have really been doing that for the last 3 seasons. When tough is hard, when the Kraken are slumping, when there seemingly is no answer or no end to the foibles, more often than not, we as media are speaking to Jordan Eberle and Jared McCann about it, in addition to, at the time, head coach Dave Haxtell. The 34-year-old is right behind McCann with 64 goals and 162 points in 253 regular season contests. He added another 11 points in 14 postseason games. He was a key piece of the team that beat a powerhouse Avalanche club and nearly upset the Stars a few weeks later. He's the first NHL All-Star in team history, and his leadership qualities should continue to be indispensable to a young Kraken squad. Well said, Colin. Absolutely well said. Now, number 3 is Yanni Gourde. Number 4 is Vince Dunn. And 5 overall, Oliver Bjorkstrand. I'll tell you right now. Yanni Gourde's not 3 for me. Bjorky might be 4. So that means I'm probably moving Vince Dunn up to 3. I think I like that better. Either way, Oliver Bjorkstrand is moving up for me. Bjorky's moving up. At first, I thought I was going to say he's at number 3, and I go back and forth. I'm okay with Vince Dunn at 4, but Yanni Gourde over Bjorkstrand for me. So over 2 seasons, they're averaging about the same points per game. But the downtick for Yanni Gourde for me in season 3 made me wonder if his role maybe is to set other people up than to contribute, you know, offensively directly. I mean, I would like both. And I don't know because Yanni Gourde, the workhorse in what he was asked to do last season, really didn't work. I tell you, I think Yanni Gourde with Bjorkstrand and Ellie Tolvanen, that's my favorite line on the Seattle Kraken. I think they did the most consistently to try to get the Kraken back on track. So, I mean, I love this. He's a clean, crafty player who shows up in the playoffs, as evidenced by his 8 points and 14 postseason tilts. He became a franchise hero after scoring both goals in Game 7 on the road against the Avalanche, helping to slay the Dragon and win Seattle its first and only playoff round. The Danish forward is locked up for 2 more seasons in Seattle. We need to lean into Oliver Bjorkstrand the way that people are so desperate to lean into Andre Burakovsky. So yeah, I think, you know what? I'm going to put him at 4. I'm going to give it to Vince Dunn. Vince Dunn has grown on me. I think that I've overlooked at times some of his more important characteristics for the Kraken specifically. Vince Dunn is without a doubt the greatest defenseman in Seattle Kraken history. That is true. And what's also true is that the Seattle Kraken have never been a great defensive team. I'm not saying that to be mean or to try and crap on Vince Dunn. I'm saying it because it's true. I do think that Vince Dunn has been willing to change up his game to think more on the defensive side or to lean into that part of his game a little bit more. And so I applaud him for that. I appreciate that so much. Now, we've had injury issues, especially last season with Vince Dunn. So there's that. But again, that's everyone on the Seattle Kraken. He's run the power play in Seattle for years and has emerged into one of the better offensive D-men in the National Hockey League. 46 points in 59 games in 23-24. 46 points in 59 games. I mean, 64 in 81 the season prior. So yeah, I like Vince Dunn. He's definitely top 5. I think he's probably 3 overall for me. Because I think about for Vince Dunn, not only what he's already done for the Seattle Kraken, but for me, the reason I really like him in that top 4 and at 3 is because for me, other than Jared McCann, he seems the most dependable for the Kraken as far as players on this list. That being said, I love Oliver Bjorkstrand and, between McCann and Dunn, obviously, Bjorkstrand has one fewer season, and that first season did kind of start off a little bit slow. I think last season, he won't get the credit for what he was doing, especially because his line produces opportunities on the long tail side of it, as opposed to immediate scoring opportunities. And that might sound, even to me, actually, now that I'm saying it, kind of like the, splitting hairs regarding analytics for defense. The reason that matters, though, is because when you have an offense that's not producing anything, I think if anything, it was just the timing and the lines, perhaps the line combos that just made him and his line just an unlucky line. So I'm absolutely going for Ollie at 4. I mentioned Jaden Schwartz, excuse me. That means that I think Yanni Gourde is too high. I don't know if 5, him and Jaden Schwartz, I could maybe interchange at 5 and 6. After winning back-to-back Stanley Cups, with the Tampa Bay Lightning, Gourde has emerged into a key piece to the puzzle for the Seattle Kraken. I do think that's correct. Gord is now a mainstay in Seattle. This is a player who isn't afraid to go into the dirty areas, is excellent on draws, and knows what it takes to win. And then they talk about him being undrafted, an important regular season contributor, um, but also knows how to up his game in the playoffs. And that's going to be critical. And some of this, I don't know if it's completely on Yanni. He was coming back from injury when he signed with us. So there's that. I think he had to work in a different capacity last season, and he did it. So I love that for us. I love that for him. I love that we got that from him. But I don't know. I think Gord is top 5 probably, but not 3. I'm giving that to Vince Dunn, and I want Ollie Bjorkstrand at number 4. But what do you think about this list? I might have to revisit it because, there's always something that you think about. And, I want also to anchor this in all-time stats that we have for the Seattle Kraken because that should matter as well. Again, not a long list. It's not a large sample size, so we have to take that with a grain of salt and just know that. But I like this conversation, and I am very hopeful, shall I say, that this list will move in a big way in the next 2 to 3 seasons. And I think there's some players that are more in the Matty Beniers camp. I'm so curious to see what Ty Cartier is going to do this season. Riker Evans is someone who has that stability where he can kind of mix maybe like Vince Dunn and Adam Larson in one kind of young player. I think that could be super exciting. Jaeger Fergus coming down the pike soon. So, I mean, you have to, if you're going to make a list, you got to go with what you have. Again, short history, small sample size. And so overall, I think the names were good. But there is a player that I thought was overlooked for this. Honorable mention at minimum has to go to Eeli Tolvanen. And we can talk about Eeli Tolvanen on the next episode of Locked on Kraken. For now, be kind to yourselves, be kind to one another, hold fast, stay true, and loud and proud we say always, 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 always. Let's go Kraken. I'll catch you on the next episode. Erica L. Ayala signing out.